Okay, welcome everyone. Thank you for joining us in tonight's Zera Shimshon shir. Tonight we're in Parshat Chukat. We're going to learn another classic piece of the Zera Shimshon, Drush Hey. The Zera Shimshon is going to probe deeply into the concept of Misas Shel Tzadikim Mechaperes, that the Misa of Tzadikim is Mechaper. So he begins quoting a Gemara in Moed Katan, Perigimel, Daf Chav Ches, Daf 28. Amar Rabbi Ami says in Moed Katan, Lama Nismacha Misas Miriam LaParaduma. Why was the death of Miriam next to the Parsha of Paraduma? Loi Melach to teach you, Maha Parah Mechaperes, just like the Paraduma is Mechaper, a person becomes Tameh, he has to have the sprinkling of the Paraduma ashes, and it's Mechaper now brings him into a state of Tahara. Af Misasan Shal Tzadikin Mechaperes. So too, the Misa of a Tzadik is Mechaper. We're going to discuss this at length as we learn the Zera Shimshon further on. Makshim. So all the Mefarshim asks, says the Zera Shimshon, and he brings a sefer told us Yitzchak, Lama Leismicha Lamaiser Karbonis. Okay, I understand that you want to connect the two ideas. The carbon is Mechaper, so too the Misa of a Tzadik is Mechaper. So if that's the case, it's much more logical, says the Toldos Yitzchak, brought down, that the Zera Shimshon brings down, to bring the Parsha of Karbonos, Carbon Chatos, Carbon Osham, and connect that to the Misa of Miriam, because it's much more logical to say that a Carbon Chatos and a Carbon Osham is Mechaper a person, or Carbon Tamid is Mechaper Klal Yisrael, as opposed to the Paraduma. So, why wasn't the death of Miriam connected to Parshas Karbonos? It's true it happened, the Parshas Karbonos is in Vayikra, so bring it over here in Bamidbar. She'em Mechaper Yosef, because they really are Mechaper on a much broader and specific level. Another question, from the Medrash Yalkut, it seems to be Shemisas Miriam, that the death of Miriam happened before the Parsha of the Mei Meriva. So just to give us a little of a background, as we're going to see that the well that produced water for Klal Yisrael throughout their stay in the Midbar, after Miriam passed away, it dried up. Klal Yisrael complained to Moshe that there was no water. Hashem, Kodesh Baruch Hu, told Moshe Rabbeinu, take your stick and go speak to the rock. We know Moshe Rabbeinu hit the rock, and Hashem got angry at Moshe Rabbeinu, and we're going to discuss that. So now, when did this happen? This happened right before Klal Yisrael was to enter Eretz Yisrael. Right? Last week's parasha we discussed Kairach. We're now fast forwarding 40 years, 39 years, and we're on the brink of Klal Yisrael entering Eretz Yisrael. Hashem tells Moshe Rabbeinu, because you did not speak to the rock like I told you, you are not going into Eretz Yisrael. Says the Zera Shimshon in the name of the Yalkut that the Misa of Miriam happened way before the Mei Meriva. The Ksiv, Kaches Amata, like we learned in Yeshiva, as we explained, Miriam died, there was no water, and Hashem told Moshe Rabbeinu, take your stick and go speak to the rock to bring forth water. Miriam. As we learned, the rock produced water because of Miriam, in her merit, in her schus. There's a bunch of different reasons why. Either because Mida Keneged Mida, she waited for Moshe Rabbeinu by the water. Moshe is connected and is compared to the entire Klal Yisrael. Others say that in the Midbar, in Mitzrayim, she took the Noshim to be Toivel when they were finished their Nida period. She was the one that helped them go to the mikvah. Others say because she sang Shira by the Yam, and the schus of singing Shira by the water, of praising, saying Shira Shishbach, Shira Shishbachas, HaKadosh Baruch Hu gave to Klal Yisrael water. All of these reasons, it ultimately came about in the schus of Miriam. And when Miriam died, the pasuk says, "V'lo hoya mayim la'eda." And continuing over there in the Medrash, our pasuk it says, "Ema mei merivui." It doesn't say that Hashem told Moshe Rabbeinu, you will not bring them into Eretz Yisrael. Ela loisaviu, you in the plural language, right? In English, the word you could mean you to the individual. You could also mean you to the group. In Lashon HaKodesh, you rarely have such a language. So loisavi means you the individual. Loisaviu is referring to you the group. Who is the group? Loyat, Hashem tells Moshe Rabbeinu, not you, Moshe Rabbeinu. V'lo yachich, and not Aaron. V'lo yachosech, and not Miriam. Olin la'arad Yisrael, you will not go into Eretz Yisrael. V'chein kasav Rashi HaPosuk, tiriveu al mei merivo. So says the Zera Shimshon, if Moshe chata, if Moshe did not act properly by not speaking to the rock, rather hitting the rock, Aaron and Miriam machotu. What avera did Aaron and Miriam do? What avera specifically, we're going to focus on Miriam now. What did she do that she did not deserve to enter to Eretz Yisrael? She had nothing to do with this. V'cheinu b'Yalkut reish Parshas V'eschanan. So too the Yalkut, the Medrash says in Parshas V'eschanan, Shalosh pamim hiskir b'Torah mei meriva. 3 times the Torah says the word mei meriva. Lo yimar kan harakti es Moshe. Teach us that because of the mei meriva, Kaviyachal Kadosh Baruch Hu killed Moshe Rabbeinu. Kan harakti is Aaron. Over here I put Aaron to death. Kan harakti is Miriam at kan lashon. This is the lashon of the Yalkut. V'hazayis Ranon, and one of the commentaries on the Yalkut Shmoini is called Zayis Ranon, asks on this medrash, Hiksha medrashim elu. How could you tell me that Miriam died because of the chet of the Mei Meriva, the incident by the waters? The Miriam we just explained, Mesa Koydem Isesel. You just told me, as we learned in Yeshiva, that first Miriam died, then there was no water, and only then did Moshe Rabbeinu attempt to draw out the water. So if that's the case, how could you tell me that Miriam died because of the chet of the Mei Meriva? She already was not alive anymore. V'tirit tesir luhu, the ein mukta mocha b'Torah. There's no chronological order in the Torah. And it's possible that Miriam died after the incident of the Mei Meriva. U'maisa Miriam hayir achakach. Says the Zera Shimshon, the Teretz Zeh Eino, it doesn't make sense. It's true, the Hakiyamrin the ein mukta mocha b'Torah. It's true, when do we say that there's no chronological order in the Torah? And immediately betray inyanim. That's only when we're talking about 2 different topics. Aval b'chad inyana, when we're talking about one topic, like over here, might the muktim, what happened first in the chronological order, u'might the ma'achamucher, and what the Torah brings afterwards happened afterwards in the chronological timeline. K'demaskidam b'perakama d'psachim davav v'ansham pirshashi shekasa b'chad inyana b'mikroset suduros b'pash achas. V'chein kasa b'al yavin, so too the Sefer b'al yavin shmur b'din ein muktim me'ucher v'ansham. V'kan, over here says the Zera Shimshon, telunas the complaints of the people that there was no water. Umisas Miriam, umaisa shal Mei Meriva, hakol hu yin echad. They were all one long story, one long topic. And therefore it has to be that Miriam and Neviah died first, followed by the cessation of the waters, followed by the complaints of the Klal Yisrael, followed by the mice of Moshe Rabbeinu not talking to the rock. So how could the Medrash say that Miriam was punished because she did the Aveira by Mei Meriva? She no longer was alive. It doesn't make sense. Another problem, says the Zera Shimshon, like we just mentioned, Miriam. So therefore, it doesn't make any sense to say that Miriam was alive, because the whole problem wouldn't have started. Gam mashetirz oida Rav was skipping a few lines because we explained it outside. The Parshat Zu, the B'shul Mei Meriva lo nichnesu atzmeiseo shel Miriam l'Eretz Yisrael. Another incredible chiddush is that the Medrash says because of the Aveira of Mei Meriva was such a great Aveira that Miriam's bones, her body, was not even allowed to be brought into Eretz Yisrael. So you're back to the original problem. Rei HaMedrash Oimek Kan Harakti is Miriam. V'nir Loimar. So the Zera Shimshon now is going to bring a tremendous chiddush, and he's going to actually teach us that Miriam Taka was still alive during the Mei Meriva. Now, just before we continue, we just have to remind ourselves how we started off the Zera Shimshon with the question: is what's the connection between Misas Miriam and Parah Aduma? Why specifically was the Misa of Miriam to teach, right? That's Mechaper on Klal Yisrael, connected specifically from the Parah Aduma, right? We learned in Moed Katan that there's a connection, that just like the Parah Aduma was Mechaper, so too the Misa of Tzadikim was Mechaper. So the question was, why specifically to the Parah Aduma? That is how we started off the shir, just to remind everybody where we're holding. V'nir Loimar, Shekayda Misas Miriam, Hischil HaBe'er Lehis Alem, Ulehis Mayet, Ulis Yabesh. That before Miriam died, the well, the rock that produced water, actually started to lose its force. Just like the neshama of a person starts to leave the body 30 days before the individual dies, so too, as a result of the neshama leaving Miriam, the waters started to dissipate day by day, little by little, and Klal Yisrael started to see that they were not having access and did not have the same amount of water as they had before. The same concept we see by Moshe Rabbeinu, that Moshe Rabbeinu said as he was about to die, that he no longer could come and go. What's that referring to? The Divrei Torah. Comes to teach us, says the Zera Shimshon, Shenestatemu mimenu mayanus chachma, that because his neshama started to leave his body, he no longer had the same access to the well springs, to the flow of the Torah. In Tainus it says that Miriam died and the well disappeared. However, prior to that, the well started to dissipate. It didn't disappear yet, but when she died, it totally disappeared. So therefore, based on this idea, says the Zera Shimshon, v'kan b'maisa zeh lo nistalik. At the time that Moshe Rabbeinu went to speak to the rock, it did not yet disappear. So how come he couldn't find it? Ela shehasela holach v'yoshav loy ben asloim v'loy hu yimakin oisam. The rock that produced the water up until that point went and hid itself amongst other rocks where Moshe Rabbeinu was not able to recognize it. K'ma shekasiv b'midrashim u'mefarshim v'chen kasiv Rashi ein sham b'hainu shenis alim v'loy shenis tachlik. Which comes to teach us that the rock hid itself, as we will see why in a second, but did not yet disappear. And therefore, at the time of the Maisa, the story of the Mei Meriva, Miriam was still alive. And the reason that the people complained was not because there was no longer water. There was still water, but it was a trickle compared to what it was prior to Miriam's neshama starting to leave. Ubishas hachet shel Mei Meriva ein lachanami Miriam haisa adayin chayim. When the Avera, the Chet of the Mei Meriva happened, Miriam was still alive. And therefore we explained that the wells started to dissipate. And therefore, when the Pasuk says, V'atamas Shamiriam Samach al v'loy ha'imayim le'eda, kasav nami a second time, V'tikaver sham. Why does it say it a second time? To teach you that after the water reappeared, at that point, she was actually no longer with us, and she passed away. Miriam to cover Sham. Mahu Sham Sham Trezimni, Zman Ben Lezel. The reason that the Torah says twice, Vatama Sham, Vatikaver Sham, is to teach us that the word Vatamas doesn't literally mean that she died, rather she started to die 30 days before the Misa. And after the Misa, the Mei Meriva, she actually passed away. So before we continue, just to give a quick recap, we learned that the well that produced water for Klal Yisrael throughout the 40 years of the Midbar started to dissipate 30 days before Miriam and Avia's death. And as a result of Moshe Rabbeinu not talking to the rock, rather hitting the rock, Moshe Rabbeinu was punished, so too was Miriam and Aaron. And the Chiddush that the Zera Shimshon so far has taught us, that Miriam was actually still alive at the time of the hitting of the rock. And the actuality, the complaint that Klal Yisrael has was not that there was no water available, but rather, that there was a trickle of water that was left. Vim Toima, so Zera Shimshon now asks a beautiful kasha. If you want to tell me that once the Tzadik, Miriam Hanavia's neshama started to leave, and therefore as a result, the koyach of the water started to dissipate, we don't see that by the Anani HaKavod. We don't see that when Aaron, 30 days before Aaron's death, the Anani HaKavod started to disappear. We don't see by the Mon. We don't see that when Moshe Rabbeinu started, before Moshe Rabbeinu passed away, the Mon didn't disappear either, or started to come in a trickle. So how come there was different? Says the Zera Shimshon, the reason that Miriam happened was specifically to be a nisayon to Moshe Rabbeinu. If he would have passed the test, even though his time had come for her to die, it would not have happened. It would have been such a great Kiddush Hashem that Moshe Rabbeinu spoke to the rock and water came forth. That tremendous Kiddush Hashem would have delayed the Misa of Moshe, Aaron, and Miriam. Really, Miriam was supposed to die. But what happened was, because Moshe did not overcome this test, again, we don't understand what this means. Moshe Rabbeinu, the biggest tzaddik of the world, went up to Shemayim, brought the Torah. But for Moshe Rabbeinu, this was a tremendous opportunity to make a tremendous Kiddush Hashem. And since it did not happen, Miriam ended up dying. But Aaron, what about Aaron? How come when 30 days before he passed away, the Anani HaKavod didn't dissipate? Another reason is, the Zera Shimshon says, beautiful. Aaron HaKohen was so beloved to Klal Yisrael that if they would have began to realize that he was passing away, and how would they have known that he was about to pass away? By seeing the Anani HaKavod starting to weaken, they would have cried out to Hashem, and Hashem would have had to answer the tefillos, and he would not have died. Moshe meis kamisas Aaron, and so too Moshe Rabbeinu died also. Therefore, by both of them, especially Aaron, but by Moshe also, if Klal Yisrael would have gotten a sense that they were on the verge of dying, they would have noticed that the Mon was, instead of coming in its usual vigor and strength daily, it was starting to weaken, or the Anani HaKavod was not as strong as it was before. They would have realized that both Moshe and Aaron were close to their death. They would have davened HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and therefore, as a result, Hashem would have had to answer the tefillos. And in actuality, Chutzruchu Lios Behatzne, their Misa had to be secret, had to be hidden. Lefichach loy nelmu hamon v'ananim hananim koidem meisam k'mayber. The connection that Klal Yisrael had to Moshe and Aaron was much stronger, much more beloved, much more dependent than their connection to Miriam. It's not that Miriam was not important. She was very important. But Aaron was beloved, we know, by all of Klal Yisrael, and Moshe Rabbeinu was the leader. So therefore, Kadosh Baruch Hu had to make it so that the Mon and the Anani HaKavod would not change in any way prior to Moshe Rabbeinu's death. But if Moshe would not have done the Avera by the rock, Miriam would have continued to live. And not only that, she would not have died in the Midbar. It's not that they died because they did an Avera. Really, they were supposed to die anyways. Their Zman came. But if Moshe Rabbeinu would have overcome the Nisayon, and he would have made this tremendous Kiddush Hashem, they would have lived. And not only would have they have lived, they would have actually gone into Eretz Yisrael. But because it didn't happen, it's kaviyachol, it's like they died because of the Avera. V'adayin yesh ledaktek. Zera Shimshon now comes to a tremendous question. Eich efsher shel misas hatzadikim mechaperes. How can it be that the misa of tzadikim is mechaper? There's a famous story with the Baba Sali. The Baba Sali said to Rav Mordechai Eliyahu that they both will see Mashiach. And it seems to be that somehow Rav Mordechai Eliyahu got a message that Baba Sali was ready to be moiser his nefesh for Klal Yisrael. So he asked him, how could it be? You told me, said Rav Mordechai Eliyahu to the Baba Sali, that we're going to see Mashiach. He said, it's true, but because there's a tremendous kitrug on Klal Yisrael, and he was not able to be mevatel it through his tefillah, the only way he could be mevatel it was through giving up his nefesh. The Baba Sali told Rav Mordechai Eliyahu that there was no way that he could be mevatel the Zera, the only way was through Misa. Similar story is said with Rav Mordechai Eliyahu before he died, the same idea, that he said that he gave up all his chusim, all of his life, all the things that he did was to save Klal Yisrael. But Lamaisa, we see that tzaddikim do die, and over here we see that Miriam died, there's no more water. So how could you tell me that the misa of tzaddikim is mechaperes? It's not true. Anuroyim adarabah shabaroy loylam achamisas tzaddikas sharei meisa Miriam nestalik haberev loyayim misas shel tzaddikim mechaperes. And if the misa of tzaddikim is mechaperes, lama bara loylam. And this is an incredible answer that the Zera Shimshon is going to be teaching us. In a way, it's a timely message to us, as in the last period of time, many tzaddikim were nifter, the mashkiach, Rav Moshe Wolfson, prior to that, the mashkiach of Matasyahu Solomon, other tzaddikim, the Kosovo Rebbe, other tzaddikim throughout the world. This is actually a message to us, says the Zera Shimshon. Shatamu kanoida. Shashefa haroy lovi aidei tzadik. We know that when a tzadik is in this world, he brings shefa into this world. As it says, Kol ha'olam kuloi zon mishil chanina b'ni. Chananya b'ni. The whole world is sustained because of Chananya b'ni. There's an idea that a tzaddik brings shefa into the world through his ma'asim tovim, his mitzvahs, and his limun haTorah. However, misnait kishein hadar roy l'kach. However, if the dar, the generation, is not worthy, it's actually is lessened, which means there's a certain level of shefa that a tzaddik is supposed to bring into this world, but if the generation is not worthy, Hashem removes it. L'chein tzaddik, and therefore the tzaddik is taken away from the generation of shil avonis hadar. Vim hadar yagush b'atzman. The generation recognizes that as a result, that Hashem cannot bring the same amount of bracha into the world. And as a result, the tzaddik is no longer here, and the shefa that he brings is gone. And they understand that it's because of our averis that it happened. Az mischaper aleim. It emerges, it comes out that they, v'yasa tshuva, and if they do tshuva, and they recognize that this only happened because of our averis, and we do tshuva, so then they become, and they get a kapara. And therefore, what happened was over here, Klal Yisrael started to see that the water started to dissipate. Right? If it was 100%, and now it was 95%, the next day was 92%, so on and so forth. They should have came to a recognition that there's a message here. Why is the well decreasing? Because a tzaddik is going to die. Who is the tzaddik? The one that's connected to the well. Miriam. Why is she dying? Because we're not worthy of her to stay around. And they should have done tshuva. And instead of doing tshuva, they did the opposite. And therefore, combined with Moshe Rabbeinu's not passing the Nisayon, it caused Miriam to die. And how is that connected to the paraduma? Mishum hachi yolaf milami paraduma. Shekashem sheparaduma metaheres tumas ames. Kach misas hatzadikim mechaperes al dar. Umino yolaf nami Shekeshem she'efer par levada eina mitaharis. So too, that the efer itself is not its own thing. It's not on its own the item that's mechaper. Im tziruf ma'im chayim, you also need an action by the man, by the woman. What's that action? They have to go to the mikvah. They have to do something on their own to change the status, and that's going to the mikvah. V'oid she'achar hazot tzorch she'itbol es gufa kodim sheitar. So there's actually a combination of that they need the ma'im chayim, where we dip the stalks together with the ashes, the parah aduma. The ma'im chayim is a nimshal to the Torah. So too the individual has to go into the mikvah, which is a nimshal of doing tshuva. If a person recognizes that something's going on and a tzaddik's death is imminent, he will do tshuva when the tzaddik dies, and he will be mechaper. It will be tremendous eis ratzon. When a tzaddik dies, everybody feels it. Everybody feels terrible, and it's an opportunity, time to improve our ways. And if we do it, HaKadosh Baruch Hu says, "I'm mechaper on your averos." So too by the parah aduma. So we learn from here, from the Zera Shimshon, a few chidushim. Chiddush number one, that at the time of the Miriam, Miriam was still alive, and the complaint that Klal Yisrael has was not that there was no water, but rather the water started to dissipate less and less. And that was because Miriam's neshama was starting to leave her body. And instead of Klal Yisrael taking advantage of this siman that Miriam was on her deathbed, so to speak, and to do tshuva, and Moshe Rabbeinu did not overcome the nisayon. As a result, it resulted in a terrible tragedy that Miriam did have to die, Aaron had to die, and Moshe Rabbeinu was unable to go into Eretz Yisrael. And therefore we should take this as a message that we should always do tshuva. Everybody knows what they have to do tshuva on their own, especially now where we lost many tzaddikim. We should use it as an opportune time to check our ways and to improve ourselves, and in that schus will be zoiche to see the binyan Beis Hamikdash from here b'yameinu amen.